woke up to the harsh scent of disinfectant, the sterile white walls of the recovery room closing in around me. My throat felt raw, as if I'd swallowed glass, and every inch of my abdomen screamed in protest. The surgery was over. That much I could piece together. The rest? A blur of fragmented memories, and the hollow absence of voices I had expected to hear. No one was there. The bed beside me was empty. The visitor's chair, a cold, plasticky thing that had once held my sister's coat and a coffee she never drank, stood abandoned. The silence was deafening. I blinked against the fluorescent lights, trying to steady my breathing. "Ms. Whitlow? You're awake," a nurse said, appearing at my side with a too bright smile and a clipboard. "How are you feeling?" "Groggy," I managed. "Where's my family? My sister? My mother? Anyone?" The nurse's smile faltered for the briefest second before she adjusted the line of her mouth. "Let me check for you." But I already knew. Deep down, I knew. They weren't here. They hadn't come. Hours passed. A volunteer brought in a tray of bland broth and gelatin, and someone adjusted the morphine drip. No calls. No visitors. I picked up my phone with trembling fingers and tapped it to life. No missed calls. No messages. Not even a lousy thumbs-up emoji. I swallowed back a mix of anger and something worse. Something hollow. I was 51 years old, with a successful business, a decent home, and enough savings to retire early if I wanted to. I'd built a life out of resilience, out of refusal to be anyone's burden. But the moment I truly needed someone, anyone, they had disappeared. The surgery had been scheduled for weeks, a hysterectomy. Complications were expected due to my age and fibroids the size of walnuts. My surgeon warned that post-op recovery might take longer, and I'd made arrangements accordingly. I'd stocked my fridge, paid my bills, given my sister Daphne, my medical proxy. Mom had promised to be there. My niece, Megan, even texted a heart emoji the night before. And then, nothing. Not one of them showed. By the second day, I was strong enough to sit up. My doctor came in, checked the scar, gave me a speech about walking as soon as I could. "Your family been in yet?" he asked casually. "No." He paused, the corner of his mouth tightening. "Well," he said gently, "maybe they'll swing by today." They didn't. A week later, I signed my own discharge papers. The nurse tried to hide her concern, but it was there in her eyes. "You're going home alone?" "That's right." "You have someone checking in on you?" I met her gaze. "No." She opened her mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. "Take it slow. Here's your prescription. Be sure to follow up with your primary care doctor." "Thank you," I said, and meant it. She'd shown me more compassion than my entire family. I took a cab back to my townhome in Arlington. 2 stories, red brick, built in the 80s with stubborn gutters, and a garden no one touched but me. The neighbor's daughter helped me up the steps. When the door clicked shut behind me, I stood in my foyer for a long, quiet moment. Then I limped to my office. The will was in the bottom drawer. Yellow folder. I'd last updated it 6 years ago, right after my father's funeral. Back then, I'd left everything to my mother and sister. Equal shares. Megan was to inherit the piano and a small college fund I'd put aside just in case. I opened the folder, read it line by line. Then I fed the whole thing into my shredder. They abandoned me, at my most vulnerable. That truth wasn't something I could just forgive. But I wasn't going to rage or rant. That wasn't my style. If they didn't want to be family when I was down, they sure wouldn't benefit when I was up. I scheduled an appointment with my attorney the next day. The receptionist, Karen, remembered me. "I hope everything's all right, Ms. Whitlow." "Just time for a change." She nodded, tapping the keyboard. "We can fit you in Friday at 11. Friday came. I wore my nicest blazer, pinned back my thinning curls, and signed the new documents with a steady hand. Instead of my family, I left everything to charity. Half went to a foundation that supported women undergoing medical procedures alone. The other half went to a music school for underprivileged girls. My niece wouldn't see a dime. My sister? Not even my kitchenware. As for Mom? She got exactly what she gave me during surgery. Nothing. Later that evening, I got a text from Daphne. Greater than, hey, how'd everything go? Mom said you were fine. I stared at the message. A week. 7 full days. She hadn't called, hadn't even asked the nurse. But now that the scary part was over, she wanted back in. I typed a single word and hit send. Greater than fine. That was it. That was all she got. I lay in bed that night, the incision tugging slightly as I turned onto my side. I could hear the wind outside my window, the sound of leaves scratching against the glass. For the first time in years, I felt something like peace. They had shown me the truth, and I had finally accepted it. But I also knew this wasn't the end of it. Because families like mine, they don't stay away when money's on the line. I just didn't expect how fast the vultures would start circling, or how far they'd go to claw their way back into my life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The first sign was the sudden flurry of missed calls. They started at 8:03 a.m. on Monday. By noon, my voicemail box was full, something that hadn't happened in years. Most of them were from my sister, 1 from Mom, and 2 from Megan, my niece, whose messages came laced with cheerful guilt, like sprinkles on a stale donut. I didn't return a single one. Instead, I brewed a pot of ginger tea, padded barefoot into my home office, and settled in for a full day of doing absolutely nothing. Healing wasn't linear, they'd told me, and I intended to milk every curve of the line. It hurt to stand too long. It hurt to sit too long. But strangely, it didn't hurt to ignore them. By evening, Daphne had escalated. Greater than we need to talk. Greater than Megan is crying. Greater than Mom is upset. You're making this worse. Greater than, why are you being so dramatic? That one made me laugh. Actually laugh, right there on my living room sofa with a heating pad wrapped around my abdomen. Dramatic? They were the ones who didn't show up. They were the ones who ghosted me during a major surgery and now wanted to flip the script? No, not this time. A few hours later, my doorbell rang. I didn't get up. It rang again, and again. Then came the knock. Not the gentle kind. No, this one had impatience in its bones. Heavy and determined. I eased off the sofa, wincing as my body protested. Through the peephole, I saw a mane of ash-blonde hair and a coat I recognized from a million brunches and bridal showers. Daphne. I opened the door exactly 3 inches. You have 60 seconds. She blinked, clearly not expecting the cold front. Annalisa, what is going on with you? We've been worried sick. I almost slammed the door right then and there. Worried sick, I repeated. For 7 days? She looked flustered. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. We thought you were fine. You didn't say anything was wrong? Quote, because I couldn't speak. I was on morphine. Mom said the hospital said you were stable. So you thought stable meant optional? She folded her arms, lips tight. Don't be petty. We all have lives, Annalise. I had Megan's recital, and Mom had her church auction. You gave my emergency contact form to the wind. That's not fair, isn't it? Silence stretched between us, long and uncomfortable. She tried to peer around the door into the house. I didn't budge. Listen, she said finally, softer now. I came to apologize. I should have come to the hospital. I should have been there. I stared at her. Not just should have. You didn't. She sighed. Okay, I didn't. I messed up. But don't throw away family over one mistake. We're all trying our best. I didn't answer. Can I come in? Not today. The door clicked shut. An hour later, Megan texted me a photo of the 2 of them on the couch with bowls of popcorn and a caption that said, asterisk, girls' night. Wish you were here. My reply was silence. 3 days later, Mom called. I didn't answer. That Sunday, she showed up. I saw her through the window as I watered my houseplants. She stepped out of her Volvo in a cardigan she'd knitted years ago and carried a Tupperware full of lemon bars. I waited until she rang the bell 3 times before I opened the door. Oh, Annalisa, she said, hands wringing. You look so thin. That's what a week of abandoned recovery will do to you. She flinched. Don't start, please. I know we dropped the ball. You didn't drop it. You threw it. She set the container on the porch railing. I came to say I'm sorry. Truly, I don't have any excuses. I should have been there. It would have been easier if she'd shouted. Or cried. But my mother had always been the kind who apologized like she was paying a parking ticket. Quick, dry, mechanical. Thanks, I said, and shut the door again. That night I received an email from an unknown address. Subject: Notice of will contestability. I clicked it open. Greater than Dear Ms. Whitlow. Greater than we are contacting you on behalf of our client, Ms. Daphne Grayson, regarding your most recent changes to your legal will. I stopped reading. They knew, already. I hadn't told them a word, but somehow Daphne had gotten wind of the changes. I called my lawyer the next morning. My sister's lawyering up, I said flatly. He whistled. That was fast. She's going to try to fight it, isn't she? Most likely. But she won't win. Your documents are airtight. She's desperate, I said. She won't care. And I was right. By Thursday, she'd sent flowers. Then cards. Then a long, handwritten letter filled with phrases like, forgive and forget, and blood is thicker than paper. Each one went into a drawer I labeled Nice Inheritance Panic. By the following week, she escalated again. Megan showed up. She knocked politely. No pounding, no drama, just her, standing on my porch with tear-filled eyes and a backpack slung over one shoulder. Aunt Annalisa, can I come in? I hesitated. Megan was 19, college sophomore. Bright, sometimes selfish, but charming. She had once spent an entire summer helping me alphabetize my vinyl collection, just because she liked the covers. Why are you here? Mom doesn't know. I came on my own. You drove from Charlottesville? Yeah, I wanted to say I'm sorry. I stared at her for a long time. Finally, I opened the door. She stepped inside quietly, looking around like she expected the house to bite. I wasn't trying to be cruel, she said as she sank into the couch. I didn't even know you were alone until after the fact. Mom told me you were fine, and then it was just convenient to believe her. Yeah, I guess. She looked up at me. Is it true you cut us out of the will? I sat across from her, hands clasped. Why do you care? Because you matter to me. Because I grew up with you being the only adult who actually listened to me. Your mom's not an adult? She gave a small, sad smile. She listens when it's convenient. That felt too familiar. I didn't come here to beg, she added. I just wanted to say sorry. For not showing up. For not asking questions. And if you ever change your mind, not about the will, but about us, I'd like to earn back your trust. That nearly undid me. Nearly. But I wasn't ready to forgive. It'll take time. She nodded. I know. She left 20 minutes later, without pressing, without pouting. And for the first time since I opened that yellow folder and fed it to the shredder, I felt a shift. A glimmer. But it didn't last. Because 2 days later, someone broke into my car. Nothing was stolen, nothing was even touched. But the glove box was open. The seat was moved. The message was clear. Point slants. We know where you live. I called the police. They shrugged. No fingerprints, no damage. Could have been a kid. But I knew better. I checked my home security cameras. Sure enough, there it was. A blurry figure at 2:18 a.m. crouching beside the driver's door. Hoodie. Slender build. Could have been Megan. Could have been someone hired. Could have been anyone. I tightened my home security system. Called my lawyer again. This time, he didn't sound so confident. They're pushing harder than I expected, he admitted. But they can't force your hand unless they can prove coercion or diminished capacity. Do I sound coerced? No, but they might try to make it seem that way. I spent the next week in a strange fog, half healing, half watching. I installed motion sensor lights, a doorbell camera, and carried pepper spray on my keychain. This wasn't grief. This was war. And the more they pushed, the more resolved I became. They would not get a dime. Not because I hated them, but because I finally saw them for what they were. entitled, and dangerous. But I hadn't yet realized how far they were willing to go, or how quickly things would spiral out of control. All I knew was that the moment I changed that will, I hadn't just sealed their fate. I had invited a storm, and it was only just beginning. The letter came on a Wednesday. Thick parchment envelope, gold foil trim, a law firm I'd never heard of embossed into the corner. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it, heart beating in slow, heavy thuds. Inside, a formal declaration of intent to challenge my will on the grounds of emotional duress and exclusionary conduct detrimental to familial expectations. In plain English, my family was suing me for changing my will. I called my lawyer immediately. "They're saying what now?" he said, his voice rising. "That I changed my will out of spite, that I'm being manipulated or acting irrationally. That's absurd. You're competent, lucid, and documented. They don't have a case. Doesn't mean they won't drag it through court." He sighed. "You're right. We'll draft a response. You might want to start documenting everything. Every contact. Every message." I already was. Every text. Every email. Every voicemail. The ones from Daphne had turned sugar slick and falsely gentle. Greater than, "Hey sis, just checking in. You doing okay?" Greater than, "I hope you know I only want the best for you. This legal stuff isn't personal." Greater than, "We all make mistakes when we're hurting. Just talk to me. Let's fix this." The messages from Mom were harder to stomach. Her tone teetered between guilt and pressure, laced with veiled warnings she probably thought sounded like love. Greater than, "You'll regret letting lawyers come between us." Greater than, "Family is forever, Annalisa. Think of how your father would feel." Greater than, "What you're doing is cruel. Megan's in tears? Is that what you want?" Then came the phone calls from numbers I didn't recognize. They didn't leave messages, but the timing was too deliberate. One every hour, all day, for days. I stopped answering my phone altogether. But the pressure didn't stay digital. On Friday, a car idled outside my house for nearly 20 minutes. Blue sedan, windows tinted. No plates I could see. When I stepped outside with my phone and started taking pictures, it peeled off without a sound. The next day, someone left a bouquet on my doorstep. Red roses, my least favorite flower. No card. I knew it wasn't a peace offering. It was a warning. Sunday night, someone followed me home from the grocery store. I didn't drive straight home. I took a winding route, looping through neighborhoods, watching the black SUV hang back, then close in, always keeping just far enough to be deniable. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the SUV drove past, slowly. I got out with my hand on my pepper spray. Every light in my house went on that night. I slept on the couch with a crowbar under the coffee table. Monday, I visited the police department. I told them everything. The break-in, the threats, the harassment. They wrote it down. They nodded. They shrugged. "No proof," the officer said, flipping through his notes. "No witnesses. You could install a few more cameras, though." "And when one of them sets fire to my front lawn, will that be enough?" He didn't answer. So I hired private security. One of my former clients, back when I still did strategic consulting, ran a personal protection agency. Within 48 hours, 2 rotating agents were monitoring the perimeter of my house in 8-hour shifts. It gave me a sense of control, until it didn't. Because then Megan showed up again. She came during a shift change, slipping in between agents, knocking politely on the back door like she hadn't been part of the siege. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back messily. "I didn't know," she said softly. "Didn't know what?" "That Mom was suing you, that Nana was involved, that she hired someone to watch you. You didn't know. Or you didn't want to know." She flinched. "I swear. I knew about the will change. But not this. Not the stalking. Not the threats. That's not okay." Yet here you are. "I'm here to tell you I'm out. I told them all to go to hell. I'm done." I raised an eyebrow. "You just walked away?" "They cut me off." Said I was choosing you over them. I said, yeah, because she was the only one who showed up when I had mono for 2 weeks. Remember that? You brought me soup every day. I nodded slowly. I'm not asking for money, she said quickly. I know it looks like that. I just wanted you to know I'm not part of it. Not anymore. That should have made me feel something. But the numbness was still too thick. I believe you, I said. She looked stunned. You do? Yes. So what now? I don't know. I'm still figuring that out. She nodded, stepping back. Okay, I'll give you space. But I'm here, for real, if you need me. She left quietly. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it until my legs stopped shaking. Later that night, my lawyer called. You're going to need to prepare for depositions. They're trying to move quickly, probably hoping you'll settle. I'm not settling. Didn't think you would, but it's going to get ugly. It already is. The next 2 weeks were a blur of meetings, statements, security checks, and sleepless nights. I submitted affidavits. Went through psychological evaluations to prove I wasn't under duress. Sent boxes of documentation. My lawyer was sharp, brilliant, even. But he couldn't shield me from the emotional toll. The betrayal, the isolation, the exhaustion. Every time I thought it couldn't get worse, it did. Until one afternoon, I found my garden vandalized. Every rose bush uprooted, every planter smashed. My favorite bench, painted teal and lined with cushions, splintered into a pile of wood. And in the middle of the chaos, a single word was spray-painted on the fence. Wondery 20. My AR 20 IR 2020. My AR 20 IR 20 I. My AR 20 I 20 R 20 I AR 20 I. Cedar I. My AR 20 I. My yelling, not yelling. Just breathing. When the security footage was reviewed, the culprit wore a hoodie, gloves, and a mask. No license plate. No identifiable features. But I knew. It was Mom. She had always hated that bench. Said it looked too childish. Said real women sat on iron, not cushions. That night, I called Megan. How bad is it over there? She exhaled slowly. Worse than you think. Nana told Daphne you've lost your mind. That you're rewriting history. That Dad wouldn't have wanted this. They're digging deep. Daphne's talking about countersuing for emotional damages. Good luck with that. She's unhinged. And Nana, she's dangerous when she feels cornered. They all are. Annalisa, I'm scared. So was I. But I couldn't show it. Because fear is what they wanted. And I had spent a lifetime giving them the benefit of the doubt. No more. That night, I drafted another letter. Not a legal one, a personal one. To Daphne. Greater than you were given every opportunity to show up. Not for my money, for me. You chose not to. Now you want to paint me as unstable to justify your own entitlement? I won't let you. You're out. This time, for good. To Mom. Greater than you taught me that family was earned. You just didn't expect me to hold you to that. You failed me when I needed you most. And now you want a reward? I owe you nothing. I mailed them the next day. Certified. Return receipt requested. It wasn't revenge. It was closure. And yet, deep down, I knew it wouldn't be over that easily. Because the kind of people who abandon you in the hospital, then sue you for your reaction, don't stop when things get hard. They escalate. And the worst was still to come. It would arrive with a single knock on the door. And a voice I hadn't heard in 22 years. The knock was sharp, precise, not impatient like Daphne's or awkward like Megan's. No, this one had weight. It was 7:43 p.m. on a Thursday. My porch light flickered once as I approached, shadows stretching across the hallway tiles. I peered through the peephole, and for a moment, the world tilted. Tall, salt and pepper beard. Slate eyes I tried hard to forget. A wool coat stretched over his frame, and in his left hand, he held a single manila envelope. I hadn't seen him in over 2 decades. Uncle Rowan. He'd vanished after my father's funeral, No phone calls, no letters. Nothing but an old photograph I'd kept buried in the attic. The two of them, shoulder to shoulder, smiling in a way I'd never seen Dad smile at anyone else. Rowan was the black sheep, the estranged younger brother who left the family business to live deliberately, as he once said. I hadn't even known he was still alive. Yet here he was. I opened the door a fraction. Rowan? He nodded once. Evening, Annalisa. My throat was dry. What are you doing here? He raised the envelope. I think it's time we talk. There was something in his eyes, not desperation, not sadness. Resolve. I stepped back. He entered slowly, glancing around the foyer like he was stepping into a memory. Place looks good. Better than your father ever kept it. What do you want? To help. I almost laughed. You disappear for 22 years, and now you want to help? I didn't disappear. I was told to stay away. That made me pause. By who? Your mother. Of course. He handed me the envelope. I opened it carefully, expecting paperwork. Instead, I found photographs. Dozens. All of me. From childhood through my 20s. Dance recitals. Graduation. That one birthday party where I wore a tiara for no reason. All moments I didn't even know were captured. I watched from afar, he said quietly. When I wasn't allowed to write or call, I kept track through people I trusted. Friends, colleagues. Sometimes I'd visit town just to see you from across the street. My knees wobbled. I sat on the edge of the stair. Why? Because you were the only light in a family full of shadows. Your father knew it, so did I. But your mother, she hated that bond. Hated what I represented. What did you represent? He smiled sadly. Freedom, defiance, everything she couldn't control. We sat in silence for a moment, the air thick with old ghosts. So why now? I asked. He leaned forward. Because I heard what they're doing to you. And I know how this family works. When they feel threatened, they get ruthless, and lonely wolves don't survive packs like that. I'm not a wolf. You are now. He stood, pacing. Your mother's hired a second legal team, not just for the will. She's digging through your business records, trying to find anything that paints you as unstable or financially compromised. How do you know that? Because one of those firms reached out to me last week, tried to get me to testify. What? Said I could help establish a pattern of erratic behavior in the Whitlow bloodline. I stared at him. You're joking. I'm not. I recorded the call. Want to hear it? He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and held it out. A crisp female voice began. Greater than Mr. Whitlow, we understand you were once close to Annalise. We believe your perspective could assist in evaluating her current decision-making patterns. Rowan paused the recording. They're building a case based on whispers, hearsay, anything that sticks. My heart pounded. You're here to warn me. And to offer a lifeline. Which is? He hesitated. Go public. Tell your story. Control the narrative before they do. You want me to air my family's dirt in public? If you don't, they will. And their version won't be kind. I stood, the room tilting slightly. I need time. Of course. I'll be in town a few days. Here's my number. Burner phone. Just in case. He handed me a small card. Handwritten digits. Old school. Then he left. I stood at the door long after he'd gone, the envelope of photographs trembling in my hands. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I went through the photos one by one. Moments forgotten. Smiles long buried. Proof that someone had cared. Quietly, from a distance. The next morning, I got a call from my lawyer. We've been served with an accelerated deposition date. They're pushing for next Tuesday. Can they do that? With enough pressure, yes. It's aggressive, unethical even, but technically legal. What do? We push back. And I think you should consider bringing in a character witness. Someone who can counteract their narrative. Like who? Family, friends, mentors. Anyone who knows you well. Rowan. I called him that afternoon. He picked up on the second ring. Annalisa? You still willing to testify? Absolutely. Then let's do it. 3 days later, we sat side by side at a long table in a sterile office with glass walls. Opposing counsel sat across from us. A pair of lawyers who looked like they'd stepped out of a prestige drama, all silk ties and smug expressions. They began with formalities. Then came the real questions. Ms. Whitlow, when did you make the decision to alter your will? After my surgery. And what was your mental state at the time? Clear. Resolved. Were you under the influence of any substances? Prescribed post-op medication, but my decision came after I stopped taking them. They pressed harder, implied things, circled the same question with different words. Then they turned to Rowan. Mr. Whitlow, how long have you been estranged from the family? I wasn't estranged. I was excluded. Did you maintain contact with Annalise over the years? Indirectly, I stayed informed. So your relationship isn't close. Not traditionally, but distance doesn't equal ignorance. I know her better than most. Do you believe she's mentally fit to manage her affairs? He smiled. I believe she's the sharpest person I've ever known. And if you think a woman surviving major surgery alone, then defending herself from a family ambush counts as unfit, then maybe you need to examine your own definitions. Silence. Then a change in strategy. They pulled out a folder labeled Whitlow Business Consulting. We'd like to enter this into evidence. We believe there may be financial discrepancies worth exploring. My lawyer stiffened. That's not the purpose of this deposition. But it speaks to character. Or to desperation, I said. They glared. The session ended 30 minutes later. Outside, Rowan turned to me. They're scared. Good. But the relief was short-lived. That night, my email account was hacked. Then my bank froze a transaction flagged as unusual activity. Then my water was shut off for an unpaid bill I'd already settled. Every day brought a new sabotage. And still, I didn't break. Because I had something they didn't. Proof. And allies. The next morning, Megan returned with a USB drive. I recorded Mom and Nana. A couple of phone calls. I know it's messy, but I think it proves they're trying to smear you. I plugged it in. Her mother's voice. Greater than if we make her look unstable, we can invalidate the will. Doesn't matter if it's true. We just need doubt. Mom. Greater than she thinks we abandoned her. She abandoned us the minute she started acting like she was better than us. Greater than let her rot. She'll come crawling back. I sat in silence as the recordings played. Every word seared. But they were also fuel. I sent them to my lawyer. His reply, this changes everything. The court date was set. And I was ready. But I had no idea what was waiting for me at the courthouse. A twist so sharp, so vile, it would make every previous betrayal feel like foreplay. Because betrayal is bad enough when it comes from blood. But when it comes from someone you thought had finally chosen you, that kind of betrayal doesn't just hurt. It hollows you out. The courthouse loomed like a mausoleum. Gray stone, arched windows. That impersonal silence government buildings all share, where echoes feel like judgments and time moves in slow, suffocating waves. I stood outside for a moment, letting the morning chill bite through my blazer. Rowan waited beside me, uncharacteristically still. My lawyer, Mr. Travers, flanked the other side, scanning the parking lot with narrowed eyes like he expected an ambush. He wasn't wrong. Inside, Daphne was already seated, flawless. Designer suit. Her hair styled into waves so perfect they looked painted. She turned as I entered, offered a brief smile, and then lowered her eyes like we were just strangers at a PTA meeting. Mom sat behind her, mink shawl, purse in her lap. The judgment in her gaze radiated across the room. Megan wasn't there. That should have been the first sign. The bailiff called order. Lawyers shuffled papers. The judge, a woman with silver hair and eyes like polished slate, called us to proceed. Travers stood. Your Honor, we move to dismiss the challenge based on newly submitted audio evidence proving bad faith and malicious intent from the challengers. He handed over a USB drive. The opposing counsel, Miss Carlyle, a shark in pearl earrings, stood just as smoothly. We contend that the recordings are illegally obtained and inadmissible. Furthermore, we have new evidence that calls into question Ms. Whitlow's mental state. My stomach turned. This was it, the twist Rowan warned me about. Carlyle lifted a manila envelope. Submitted this morning, Your Honor. Affidavits, documents, a new deposition. From whom? The judge asked. Carlyle smiled. Megan Grayson. The world tilted. Rowan's hand gripped my shoulder as if he felt it too. Impossible, I whispered. The judge flipped through the file, her eyebrows raised slightly. We'll take a short recess, both parties to remain within the building. I shot to my feet as soon as the gavel struck. She wouldn't. She couldn't. But Travers already had the file. He skimmed the pages. His face turned grim. She did. He handed me a copy. I scanned Megan's handwriting, the familiar loops and flourishes of her signature at the bottom of each statement. She claimed I pressured her, that I manipulated her into turning over audio recordings, that I coached her on what to say to make her mother and grandmother look bad. And worst of all, she claimed I threatened to disinherit her unless she complied. It was a complete fabrication. Every word. I need to talk to her, I said, standing. Travers grabbed my wrist. No, not here, not now, don't give them anything. She lied. Yes, but if you confront her, they'll use your anger to paint you as unstable. You have to stay calm. Let us fight this. I sat down again, heart pounding. My fingers shook. My stomach twisted. Betrayal burned hotter when it came from those who once offered you refuge. Rowan leaned in. She was your last thread of hope. I nodded, and now it was gone. The session resumed. The judge allowed a formal hearing on the new evidence. Travers objected. Overruled. Carlyle smirked. Daphne kept her face unreadable. Mom's mouth curved into a knowing smile. Megan never entered the room. Her deposition was read aloud. Her words, but not her voice. Cold, calculated, coached. I listened to it all in silence. Then it was my turn. I stood, looked the judge in the eye. Your Honor, I don't know what Megan was promised. I don't know what threats were made. But I do know I never manipulated her. I asked for the truth. She gave it. Willingly. She came to me, not the other way around. Do you have documentation of that? I opened my bag, pulled out a printed text thread, dates, times, screenshots. Video stills from the security camera at my back door. Megan walking up. Megan handing over the USB. The judge reviewed the evidence. Then she turned to Carlyle. This looks inconsistent with your deposition. Strongly so. Carlyle's face remained a mask. My client may have been coerced without realizing it. Rowan laughed once under his breath. The judge glanced up. Proceed carefully, counselor. That moment gave me a sliver of hope. The rest of the day was a blur. Legal terms, motion filings, objections, approvals, deadlines. At 5:12 p.m., the judge adjourned for the day. We'll reconvene in 72 hours. In the meantime, I will personally review the contested materials and issue a preliminary finding. Do not contact the witnesses. Do not interfere with opposing counsel. Court is dismissed. Outside the courtroom, I collapsed onto a bench. I trusted her, I whispered. Rowan sat beside me. That's what makes it hurt. Travers joined us. We're still in this. But it's close. They're desperate. That's why they used Megan. They got to her. Yes, probably with promises. Maybe threats, maybe both. I closed my eyes. You can't control their moves, Travers said. Only your response. You've done everything right so far. Stay steady. But I didn't feel steady. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed at Rowan's rental apartment, one-bedroom flat above an old bookstore he once owned. Dusty, but warm, safe. I barely spoke, barely moved. At midnight, I checked my phone. One message. From Megan. Greater than I'm sorry. Just 2 words. No explanation, no excuses, no attempt at healing. I didn't reply. The next morning, Rowan made coffee strong enough to revive the dead. We sat at his tiny kitchen table, watching the sunlight slice through the dust. "You still have a chance to win," he said. "What's the point if it costs me everyone I ever loved?" "You didn't lose them, they revealed themselves." I didn't argue, because I knew he was right. The next 72 hours passed in a haze of legal prep, document reviews, witness lists. Travers worked like a machine. Rowan made lists of character references. I tried to breathe. Then came Friday. Court resumed. The judge looked more serious than before. "I've reviewed the submissions. There are glaring inconsistencies in Ms. Grayson's deposition. Furthermore, Ms. Whitlow has provided ample proof of voluntary engagement. The court will not allow Megan Grayson's testimony to proceed unless she appears in person for cross-examination." A gasp rippled through the room. Mom's mouth tightened. Daphne looked like she'd swallowed nails. The judge continued. "Furthermore, I am formally dismissing the motion to freeze Ms. Whitlow's assets. This court will not serve as a weapon for emotional manipulation." Relief washed over me. But I didn't smile. Not yet. Because I knew the war wasn't over. After court, I walked out into the sun. It felt warm for the first time in weeks. And waiting on the steps was Megan. Her eyes were red. Her hands trembled. "I didn't know they'd twist it like that," she whispered. "You signed it." "They told me if I didn't, they'd cut me off. Said you wouldn't forgive me anyway." "They were right." She flinched. "I'm trying to fix it. I'll testify. For real." I looked at her, really looked. Saw the girl I once held when she broke her wrist on a trampoline. The teen who borrowed my earrings and never returned them. The woman who lied for personal gain. "We'll see," I said. Then I walked past her. Rowan fell into step beside me. That was colder than I expected. It wasn't cold. It was survival. 3 days later, the judge made her ruling. The challenge was denied. My will would stand. My assets remained mine. And my family? Officially cut off. They didn't speak to me after the verdict, didn't call, didn't email. But I wasn't naive. They weren't done. They were just regrouping. Because families like mine didn't go quietly. They waited, they schemed. And they always came back. But next time, I'd be ready. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. I didn't celebrate. After the ruling, after the gavel struck, after the courthouse doors groaned shut behind me, I didn't breathe a sigh of relief. I didn't toast with champagne or call old friends. I didn't cry. I went home, locked the doors, sat on the floor of my office, and stared at the portrait on the far wall, Dad and me, at my college graduation, his arm around my shoulder, my cap slightly askew, his tie crooked because he always refused to wear it right. His smile that day was the last honest one I ever saw in a family member. Rowan stayed with me for a few days. Said he had business in town, but I knew better. He sat in the garden some mornings, helping me replant what had been destroyed. He didn't ask how I was doing, because he knew. Sometimes the loudest support is silence. Megan called twice, left voicemails. Greater than, "Please, just talk to me." Greater than, "I made a mistake." I was scared. I didn't think they'd go that far. I didn't answer. Some betrayals can't be patched over with apologies. Some fractures stay fractures. But the quiet didn't last. Exactly 9 days after the ruling, I received a letter. Hand-delivered, no postage, no return address. Just my name in block letters across the front. Inside, a single sentence. "Nogard, you may have won the courtroom, but you haven't won the war." Typed. No signature. I called Travers. He came over within the hour, read the note, and exhaled sharply. Threatening, but vague, which makes it harder to trace. It came during a security changeover. Someone timed it. He nodded. "I'll loop in law enforcement, but unless something more concrete happens." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Rowan replaced all the locks that week, upgraded my cameras, talked me into getting a dog. Not a toy breed, but a real guard dog. We visited a local trainer and left with a retired Belgian Malinois named Gracie. Quiet, watchful, loyal. I slept better with her at the foot of the bed, but paranoia crept in through the cracks. Every creak of wood at night made my chest tighten. Every knock at the door felt like a countdown. I checked my bank account 3 times a day, changed my passwords weekly, stopped using social media altogether. Then the smear campaign began. First, it was a blog post, anonymous, titled, "The Greedy Widow: How a Wealthy Woman Turned on Her Own Blood." Complete fiction. But it spread. Shared on Facebook, quoted on Reddit, linked in forums. Then came the YouTube video, voice distorted, stock footage. Accusations, elder neglect, financial fraud, mental instability. All untrue. But perception is powerful. My consulting business took a hit. 3 long-term clients asked to pause. 2 new prospects pulled out. I filed reports, hired a PR consultant, issued statements. But online fires spread faster than water. Rowan tracked the blog's IP spoofed. The video uploader deleted their account, no trace. They're using burner accounts and VPNs, he said. Whoever's behind this knows what they're doing. They're professionals. Or hired them. We both looked at each other. Daphne, I said. Or Mom. We didn't have proof, but we had pattern. Then came the bombshell. Travers called one morning, voice tight. You need to sit down. Already am. There's a new motion, filed under emergency status. Daphne's team is alleging medical incompetency. They're petitioning to have you placed under temporary guardianship. I went still. What? They're claiming you're unfit to manage your affairs, that your recent behavior demonstrates cognitive decline. They want to institutionalize me. In essence, yes. The room spun. On what grounds? Fabricated ones. They've submitted medical records, partial ones, taken out of context. Cherry-picked notes, statements from doctors you haven't seen in years. And the judge accepted the motion? Only enough to set a hearing date, 2 weeks from now. What do? We counter, hard. Full psych eval, witnesses. We bring in every shred of evidence proving you're competent. I've been running a business for 12 years. Exactly. And you'll need to prove every bit of it. The next 2 weeks were a blur. Psychologists, accountants, friends and former colleagues who flew in to testify. Gracie never left my side. Rowan slept on the sofa. I barely ate. Megan texted again. Greater than, they're going too far. I tried to stop them. They said I'd be cut out too. Greater than, please, let me help. I didn't reply. Because the time for help had passed. The hearing took place in a smaller courtroom, more intimate, less formal, but every bit as tense. Daphne's team presented first. Charts, statements, diagnoses that didn't match. A doctor who spoke vaguely about, quote, declining executive function, who had seen me once, 5 years ago, for stress-related headaches. Then came their psychologist. Based on the information provided, it's my opinion that Ms. Whitlow exhibits patterns consistent with early-stage cognitive impairment. Travers nearly leapt from his chair. Objection. She never examined my client. Sustained. Then it was our turn. I testified for over an hour. I answered questions, recalled dates, quoted contracts, explained financial decisions. My own psychologist testified, my neurologist, my business partner from London, a former professor, and finally Rowan. He stood, calm and clear. Annalise is the most capable person I know. I've watched her endure betrayal, lawsuits, lies, and threats. And she never once lost her clarity, her sanity, or her spine. The judge took a full day to deliberate. When we returned, her ruling was simple. The court finds no evidence of incompetency or cognitive decline. Petition denied. Daphne exploded. This is a mistake. She's manipulating you. She manipulated all of us. The judge slammed the gavel. One more word, and you'll be held in contempt. Rowan whispered, checkmate. But the win felt hollow. After court, Megan was waiting outside. Tear-streaked, pale, alone. I tried to stop her, I really did. I looked at her. You didn't try hard enough. Please, I'll testify for you. I'll sign anything. Just, please talk to me. I took a long breath. You already did. To them, when it counted. She collapsed into tears. But I walked past her. Because healing doesn't come from second chances handed out like candy. It comes from peace earned the hard way. I was tired. And the war wasn't over. But for the first time in months, the battlefield was quiet. And in that quiet, I could breathe again. At least until the next attack. Because there was one person I hadn't heard from yet. One person whose silence was louder than all the rest. And when she finally spoke, it would change everything. Mom. It came on a Tuesday. A letter. Not a lawsuit, not a summons. A letter. Handwritten. Folded in thirds. Tucked inside an envelope sealed with a blood-red wax stamp. The kind my mother used when she wanted to remind the world she was once a woman of elegance, of poise, of old-fashioned standards too high for mere mortals. I recognized the handwriting instantly. Sharp, deliberate curves, slanted right, as though even her script refused to bend toward comfort. She didn't use my name. Just began. Greater than you have humiliated us. Us. Not Nuntav me. Not Nuntav Zeus, because Mom never spoke as an individual. She wrapped herself in the collective cloak of family honor like armor. Greater than you have dragged our name through public disgrace, you have disrespected your elders, betrayed your blood. And then, after the poison came the dagger. Greater than your father would be ashamed. That one hurt. She knew it would. Because Dad was the one person who had seen me. Truly, fully, and she had spent 20 years using his absence as a weapon. Greater than, but there is still a path back. I blinked. A path back? Greater than renounce the changes. Apologize. Rejoin the family. And we will forget this. Detour. We will heal. I read it 3 times. Then I burned it. The fireplace in my living room hadn't been used since last winter. I opened the flue, struck a match, and fed the page to the flames 1 inch at a time. The wax sizzled. The words curled. I didn't cry. But I did call Rowan. He came over that afternoon bringing fresh strawberries and cheese from a market downtown. We sat on the back porch, Gracie curled at my feet, and I told him about the letter. He didn't say anything for a while. Then, she's trying to reel you in. With guilt. With the illusion of reconciliation, but she doesn't want peace. She wants compliance. I nodded slowly. And what happens when she realizes I won't bend? He set down his glass. Then she'll destroy you. She tried. The very next morning, a CPS agent showed up at my door. Child Protective Services, she said. Badge out. We received a tip about potential child endangerment at this residence. I stared at her. I don't have children. I know. The report claimed you were harboring a minor against court orders. A girl named Megan. I almost laughed. You're welcome to look. She did. Walked through every room. Gracie followed her, tail stiff. When she returned to the front door, she shook her head. This was clearly malicious. I'm sorry you had to deal with this. Do you get this often? More than you'd think. Family feuds, inheritance battles. She gave me her card. If it escalates, call me directly. It escalated. 2 days later, the IRS sent a notice. My last 3 years of tax filings were under review. Travers stepped in, hired a specialist. Within a week, the audit was deemed unfounded, but it was another storm I had to weather. Then the HOA got involved. Noise complaints, lawn violations, a request to repaint my shutters to meet neighborhood aesthetic standards. It was endless. Every channel she could reach, Mom turned into a blade. Every form of discomfort became a tactic. Rowan started calling it the siege. But I called it something else. The final test. Because that's what this was. Not a war to win, but a line to hold. And I would hold it. One night, unable to sleep, I dug into old records. My father's journals, financial ledgers, letters he wrote me before his heart gave out in a gas station parking lot. And I found it. A small note, tucked inside the final pages of his last notebook, barely legible. Greater than, if they ever turn on you, know that I always believed in your strength, and that the house in Abingdon is yours, no matter what your mother says. I froze. Abingdon. A cottage on a bluff. I'd only been there once as a child. It was supposed to be a summer retreat, but we never went back. Mom said it was sold. I opened my laptop, typed in the address. Still owned by David Whitlow. Still active. Still mine. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. I called the county clerk the next morning. Yes, ma'am. That deed hasn't changed hands since 1996. Taxes are paid through an escrow fund. The owner named in perpetuity is you. I booked a flight the same day. Rowan drove me to the airport. You sure you want to do this alone? I need to see it for myself. Watch your back. Always. The flight was short. The drive from the regional airport shorter. 1 hour along winding roads, tall trees flanking the car like sentinels. The cottage stood untouched. Whitewashed stone, green shutters, ivy curling up the side like a slow-motion fire. I unlocked the door with the spare key I'd kept in a box since I was 13. Inside, silence. Dust. Furniture covered in sheets. A kitchen table worn soft with time. A fireplace that hadn't seen flame in 20 years. But it was mine. I spent 3 days cleaning. The place had good bones. Strong walls, a roof that needed love but not miracles. On the 4th day, I received a voicemail. From a blocked number. Mom. Greater than, so this is how it ends. You dig up skeletons and think they'll save you? You think some dusty cabin gives you power. You were always naive. Just like your father. Greater than, but here's the thing, Annalise, I'm not done. And if you think you've won, you've clearly forgotten who raised you. She hung up. I stood in the doorway of the cottage, her voice echoing in my head. And I knew. This wasn't just about money. It never had been. It was about control. And she was losing it. Back home, Rowan picked me up. I told him everything, showed him the deed. He smiled. Then it's time to finish this. How? By doing what she fears most, living, without her, on your terms. So I did. I opened the cottage as a retreat for women recovering from medical trauma. I called it the second room, a nod to the hospital room I'd been left alone in. I filed for nonprofit status, used part of my inheritance to renovate. Volunteers poured in. Stories followed. Articles, interviews, donations. The smear campaign stopped. Because light makes shadows scatter. And Mom? She went silent. For 6 months. Until the day I found her sitting on my porch. Alone. No lawyers. No letters. Just her, a shawl over her shoulders. Eyes more tired than I'd ever seen. I didn't speak. She didn't ask to come in. Just looked up at me. I lost. I stayed silent. I pushed, too hard. I wanted control. Because I didn't know how else to hold on to anything. I waited. And I'm old, Annalisa. I don't have many years left. And I know I won't get your forgiveness. But I wanted you to hear me say it. She looked down at her hands. I'm sorry. The words were barely above a whisper. I sat beside her. For a long time, we just stared at the horizon. I didn't forgive her. But I didn't hate her either. Some victories don't come with cheers or confetti. They come with silence, with breath, with peace. And finally, I had it. Mom never came back after that. She stood, slowly, as if each movement was another unspoken apology, and walked down my porch steps with a hand pressed to the railing like it might collapse under her weight. I didn't call out. I didn't stop her. I let the silence stretch between us like a field neither of us wanted to cross again. When her car disappeared at the end of the gravel road, I sat with Gracie beside me, and for the first time in almost a year I let the tears fall, not from pain, not from anger, but from release. The war was over. No lawsuits, no anonymous blogs, no legal filings or veiled threats or honey-slicked phone calls from Megan. The silence held, but it wasn't weaponized anymore. It was honest. Final. I resumed work at my consulting firm slowly. Most of my clients had stayed loyal despite the digital mudslinging. A few had even written personal notes of support. I let Rowan handle the inquiries from journalists. He had a knack for charming skeptics and deflecting nonsense. The cottage in Abingdon began to fill. We launched our first 30-day recovery residency. 4 women, all of them recovering from surgeries, abuse, divorces, or grief too tangled for diagnosis. We cooked together, gardened together, took long walks along the cliffs, and read each other poetry at night. One of them, a middle-aged surgeon named Celeste, had been abandoned by her husband during cancer treatment. He said I made him feel useless, she told me one night, slicing vegetables for dinner, so he moved in with a nurse who made him feel needed. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The ache between us was enough. When she left, she hugged me with her entire frame. This house saved me. You saved yourself. But I understood what she meant. The second room became more than a retreat. It became an answer, an echo in reverse. A reply to every hospital bed sat beside alone, to every voicemail unanswered, to every call sent to silence. People began to talk. An op-ed in the *Richmond Times. Then a feature in a women's magazine. Then NPR called. They wanted an interview. You sure you're ready for that kind of attention? Rowan asked. I was alone in a hospital room. After that, microphones aren't scary. I said yes. We taped it in the old sitting room at the back of the cottage. Just me, the host, a mic, and a few pre-scripted questions that she quickly abandoned. Why did you do it? She asked, raw and plain. Because I was supposed to be loved, and I wasn't. So I made a place for people who deserved it. That line ended up in the headline. After the interview aired, applications doubled. Donations tripled. We began plans for a second house, one closer to D.C. My accountant said I'd need to restructure my portfolio to accommodate it. I did. Then, one day, I opened my email and froze. A message from Megan. Subject: just tell me if you hate me. I hovered my mouse over it, walked away, made tea, fed Gracie, came back. Clicked. Greater than Aunt Annalise. Greater than I keep writing this email and deleting it. So here's the shortest version I can manage. Greater than I don't expect forgiveness. I just need you to know I see it now. Greater than I see them, what they did, what I did. Greater than I wanted them to love me. That's all. I wanted to matter to them. But I didn't understand the cost until it was too late. Greater than I'm applying to law school. Family law. I want to fight for people like you. People who get steamrolled because the people hurting them wear smiles and pearls and fake apologies. Greater than I'm not asking to come back into your life. But I'm here if you ever want to yell at me, or write me off officially, or just sit somewhere and say nothing. Greater than I love you. Greater than always did. Times M. I didn't reply. Not right away. I forwarded it to Rowan. He called me 20 minutes later. That took guts? Or guilt? Both. What would you do? What you always do, listen to yourself, not them. I waited a week. Then I sent one line. Greater than I don't hate you, but we aren't ready for the same room yet. She didn't respond. I think she understood. Winter arrived. We weathered our first snowfall in Abingdon. Thick, wet drifts that silenced everything. I built a fire in the hearth and listened to the wind scrape against the stone. Rowan came down for the holidays. We didn't talk about the past. We made cinnamon tea and played chess badly and watched old black and white movies. On Christmas Day, he handed me a wrapped box. Inside, a copy of Asterisk the Velveteen Rabbit. I opened to the inside cover. Greater than you become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't happen often to people who break easily. Love R. I closed the book slowly. You think I'm real now? I think you always were. The new year came, quietly. Then, in early February, a letter arrived. From a law firm. My mother had passed away. Peacefully. In her sleep, no drama, no dramatics. A final act of stillness from a woman who had orchestrated her life like an opera. Her will was unambiguous. Daphne received the house, the jewelry, the stocks. Megan received a trust fund. And I? A letter. Typed, formal, folded into a crisp triangle inside a lawyer's folder. Greater than Annalise. Greater than, you were right. Greater than I failed you. Greater than, I'm sorry I never said it when it counted. This is too late. I know that. But I also know it was never really about money. Greater than, you needed me to see you. I didn't. That's on me. Greater than, I hope you found people who do. Times M. That night I sat in the cottage, fire crackling, snow outside, and cried for the mother I never had, and the one I might have in some small, broken way begun to understand. I didn't go to the funeral, but I sent flowers. 3 white lilies, one for each of us, what we were, what we lost, what we might have been. Gracie rested her head on my knee, her breath warm and steady. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, I felt whole. The pain didn't vanish. It never would. But it didn't control me anymore. I had survived abandonment, gaslighting, lawsuits, lies. I had turned silence into sanctuary. I had learned the most sacred thing a woman can learn, that the family you choose is always stronger than the one that tries to break you. And that sometimes victory looks like a quiet life, a warm fire, and the soft exhale of a dog who trusts you with her dreams. And I'd take that over forgiveness any day. Spring didn't arrive so much as exhale its way into the hills. The cottage thawed in layers, frost giving way to dewy grass, the scent of lilacs drifting in through cracked windows, and the slow, sleepy return of robins in the eaves. With each new bloom, I felt my lungs fill more completely. Not just with air, but with permission. Permission to begin again. The second room's next cohort arrived in mid-April. This time, 6 women, ages 29 to 72, each with a story that pulsed beneath their silence. One, a retired postal worker named Thelma, arrived with 2 suitcases and a trembling hand. Her husband of 40 years had left her the week she was diagnosed with lupus. He said he wasn't built for hospital, she told me, tears in her eyes but her voice firm. Another, Janine, was a firefighter who had suffered 3rd-degree burns, rescuing a child. Her boyfriend moved out while she was still in ICU. Said he wanted someone with smooth skin, she whispered one night, rubbing lotion into the scars that curled down her arms like melted wax. I didn't speak. Sometimes words are the enemy. Sometimes silence is an embrace. We painted the sunroom that month. Yellow. A bright, buttered tone that felt like laughter on the walls. The women chose it unanimously. We want to be reminded, Janine said, her smile crooked but sincere. That joy is still allowed. They stayed for 5 weeks. When they left, I gave them each a key, not to the cottage but to the spare room in their own homes. Keep this, I said, and promise to open that room one day for someone who needs it. That became the new tradition. The second room didn't end with our walls. It grew, multiplied, became a kind of underground railroad for recovery. For women who had been left behind in the worst ways, and were ready to rise anyway. Rowan started calling me the quiet architect. Quote, "You're rebuilding something," he said one evening, as we sat watching the stars spread like spilled sugar across the sky. "I'm not sure what." Sanctuary. Not for hiding, for healing. We talked more in those days. About Dad, about the years lost, about why he'd never pushed harder for Rowan to be included. "Because he loved your mother," Rowan said simply. "And sometimes, love makes cowards out of good men." I understood that now. Love had made me wait too long for things I'd never receive. So I stopped waiting. Instead, I started writing. Essays, posts, reflections, little letters to the world, not as a warning, but as a breadcrumb trail for anyone else crawling their way out of familial wreckage. One of them went viral. Cypral titled, "The Day They Left Me Alone in a Hospital Room, and What I Built Because of It." The floodgates opened. Emails, comments, messages from strangers. Some just said, "Thank you." Others said, "Me too." One message caught my eye. Greater than, "You don't know me, but I worked at the hospital where you had your surgery. I was one of the nurses that checked in that week. You probably don't remember me. But I remember you. Alone. Brave. Kind. Even then. I'm so glad you turned your pain into something holy. Thank you for remembering us too." I printed it, framed it, hung it on the wall of my office at the cottage. Every time I passed it, I remembered that loneliness doesn't erase our goodness, it just refines it. The board of the second room began lobbying for a national partnership. We met with nonprofits, women's shelters, even a few private hospital networks. In June, we secured a grant to build a sister facility in Vermont. Rowan offered to move up there to oversee the renovation. "I'm old," he said, winking, "but I still know how to swing a hammer." We hugged tightly before he left. "This wouldn't exist without you," I told him. "Neither would you," he replied. And maybe that was true. Maybe we aren't built alone. Maybe we are forged in the hands of those who show up when the world turns its back. One afternoon, late in the summer, I received a letter from Megan. It wasn't an email. It was real, ink on paper. Inside, greater than I passed my first semester, full ride, top of my class in family law. Greater than I tell your story, sometimes anonymously, sometimes not for sympathy, but because people need to know it happens. That abandonment doesn't always come from strangers. And that healing doesn't always come from blood. Greater than, I still haven't forgiven myself. But I've stopped expecting you to, and that's okay. I just wanted you to know I'm trying, and I'm becoming someone I think you'd respect. Megan. I placed the letter in a box beneath my bed, alongside old photographs, my father's journals, and a printed copy of the will I rewrote with my own hand. The next morning, I opened a new folder on my computer. Nom's manuscript, the second room. I began to write. Not just about me, but about all of us. The women who were left in beds. The ones who were told, "You'll be fine," and never checked on again. The ones who carried their scars in silence. The ones who turned grief into growth. Every story mattered, and it was time we told them. Because stories are seeds. And from the cracked ground of abandonment, a garden had begun to bloom. And in that garden, even the most shattered of women had learned to stand tall again. Even me. Especially me. And I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Summer waned, and with it, the air grew soft again, like the world was breathing slower after months of holding tension in its lungs. The second room was now booked out a year in advance. I stopped being able to keep up with every email personally. Volunteers answered the inbox. Therapists reviewed applications. I became, reluctantly, what I never thought I'd be. The face of something bigger than me. Some days I still felt like the woman curled in a hospital bed, waiting for someone who never came. Other days I felt like a lighthouse. Not healed, but lit. That fall, we launched the Vermont expansion. Rowan oversaw construction with the precision of a man who still measured time in hammers and sawdust. The facility had 14 rooms, a meditation deck, and a writing studio named after my father, the David Whitlow Room. I didn't tell anyone, but when it was finished, I cried in that room alone for an hour. It felt like he was finally included. Like maybe, wherever he was, he saw me. Meanwhile, I kept writing. The memoir had grown beyond its original vision. What began as a collection of essays had become a braided narrative of my abandonment, the legal battles, the retreat's founding, and the intimate stories of the women who came to heal here. I changed every name but my own. Some of them still wrote to me after reading their pages. "Thank you for making me visible," one woman said. "You reminded me that pain doesn't make me disposable," wrote another. A small press offered a publishing deal. I turned it down. I didn't want anyone editing the parts that weren't pretty. Instead, I hired a self-publishing team, chose a cover with cracked porcelain mended with gold leaf. Titled it simply, After They Left. It went live in November. And something shifted. Within a week, the book climbed to number 4 in medical memoirs, then number 1 in women's recovery. Then it hit the general nonfiction list. Sales I didn't care about. What I cared about were the letters. Thousands. Emails, paper notes, voice messages from people who found the courage to confront their families, end toxic ties, or even check themselves into surgery they'd been avoiding for fear they'd wake up alone. One woman wrote, "Greater than your story made me bring a friend instead of my mother to my mastectomy. It was the best decision I ever made. I woke up to someone who wanted to be there, not someone who came out of obligation." I printed that and framed it too. We started a scholarship fund for applicants who couldn't afford to miss work. Rowan called it the Backbone Fund. And then, one night in December, I received a package at the cottage. No return address. Just my name. Again, in that familiar, slanted cursive I hadn't seen since her funeral. Inside was a worn notebook, leather-bound. Gold-embossed initials, M.W. Mom's journal. There was a note paper-clipped to the front. Greater than, she wanted this to find you after she passed. She didn't tell anyone what was inside. We found it while clearing her things. It felt right that it should go to you. Signed simply, Megan. I held the journal for a long time before opening it. And when I did, it broke something open in me I hadn't realized was still bricked shut. Mom's writing wasn't what I expected. The early pages were stiff. Observational. Comments on fashion, neighbors, seasonal recipes. But then, a shift. Greater than Annalise was 5 today. She asked why her shadow was longer than mine in the morning. I didn't know how to answer. God, she's so smart. Too smart. I worry I'll fail her. Another entry. Greater than David says she's like me, but she's not. She's stronger. I see the steel already. She doesn't need me. I don't know how to mother someone like that. And later. Greater than she made honor roll. Again. I clapped, smiled. But I felt so small next to her. So unnecessary. Is that what motherhood is supposed to feel like? Pages and pages. Not all kind. Some deeply resentful. Others naked with guilt. Greater than. When she had surgery, I couldn't go. I told Daphne she was fine. I lied. I was scared. Scared she'd look at me and finally say it. That she didn't need me anymore. I closed the journal at dawn. And for the first time since her death, I whispered, "I see you too." That week, I wrote Megan back. A letter. No salutation. Just. Greater than I received the journal. Thank you for sending it. Greater than. Greater than I won't pretend it fixes everything, but it explained more than I expected. Greater than. Greater than, and I want you to know, if you ever visit Abingdon, the guest room is yours. No forgiveness. But maybe a door. Cracked open. 2 days before Christmas, she replied. Greater than I'll come in spring, if that's okay. It was. Rowan called on New Year's Eve from Vermont. Finished the first round of plaster. You wouldn't believe how fast the snow falls up here. I'll visit in the spring. Bring Gracie, she'll love the forest. Gracie thumped her tail like she understood. That night, as the world counted down from 10, I didn't toast or cheer. I lit a candle, held it near the fireplace, whispered the names of the women who'd come through our doors. My father, Rowan, Celeste, Janine, Thelma, even Megan. And one final name, Annalisa. Because I needed to thank myself too. For surviving. For not folding. For building something sacred from ashes. And for knowing, finally, that healing isn't a destination. It's a home. And I'd built mine, brick by beautiful, defiant brick. And in it, I was never alone again. The crocuses bloomed 2 weeks earlier than usual that year. Delicate purple petals pushing through frost-bitten soil, insisting that spring would come, ready or not. Megan arrived on the first Monday in April. She didn't call ahead. Just pulled into the gravel driveway with a duffel bag in the passenger seat and eyes that looked older than they should have for 23. Gracie barked once and then, as if she remembered her, wagged her tail gently. I opened the front door before Megan reached the porch. Hey, she said. Hey. We stood there a long moment. No hug, no apology, just the weight of everything we'd both carried, finally setting down between us. I don't expect anything, she said, voice barely above the breeze. I just want to help. I nodded once. You can start with the rosemary beds. She smiled. Shaky, but real. That first week, we didn't talk about the past. We worked, planted, repaired fencing, cooked with the new residents. Megan read aloud in the evenings, essays from women who had written in after reading the book. On Friday, we sat by the fire pit with 2 mugs of spiced tea. The stars scattered overhead like a secret language. I'm sorry, she said, not looking at me, for everything, not just the court stuff. For every time I chose silence when I should have asked you how you were. I stirred my tea. You were young. That's not an excuse. No, but it's a truth. She exhaled, shoulders trembling. Sometimes I think about what it must have felt like, that day, waking up in the hospital, alone. I think about it less now. I hope you forget it completely. I won't. But I don't need to. She looked at me, and I saw the girl who used to braid daisies into my hair when she was 5, the one who hid notes under my pillow after sleepovers, the one who'd been raised by wolves and then taught to bare her own teeth. She was trying. And I saw that. By the second week, she was waking up early to help prep breakfast for the women. She taught one of them how to build a LinkedIn profile. She refiled all our grant paperwork. She started calling donors who'd lapsed. The house felt different with her in it. Not perfect, but fuller. One afternoon, I found her in my office, staring at the old photo of Dad and me. Do you ever wonder what he'd think of all this? She asked. Every day. I think he'd be proud. I watched her for a moment. I think he'd want us to try again. She turned to me. I'd like that. And just like that, not with a ceremony or declaration, we began to rebuild. Brick by careful brick. That month, Megan received her first law school acceptance. Columbia. Full ride. She showed me the letter with shaking hands. I don't know what to do. You go, I said. You build something even bigger. But the retreat will still be here, and so will I. She left in May. Rowan drove down from Vermont to see her off. We stood in the driveway, waving until her car was a speck on the road. That girl, Rowan said, is going to change the world. She already changed mine. Summer brought another cohort, 12 this time. We expanded again, converted the barn into an overflow lodge. Rowan designed it. Megan donated the funds from a small legal scholarship she'd won for her essay, What Family Law Gets Wrong. We printed the essay and framed it, hung it beside the door. The women who came that summer were different, not just healing, but hungry for action, change, reform. We hosted our first community town hall on women's recovery rights. A senator's aide showed up, then a journalist, then a donor with a check so large it made my knees buckle. By fall, we had 4 full-time staff. By winter, we had a wait list into 2027. And then came the call. Is this Annalise Whitlow? Yes. This is Ruth Carter with the National Recovery Alliance. We'd like to present you with our Phoenix Award at this year's summit. Why? She laughed softly. Because you proved that silence can be sacred, but also transformative, and that being left behind doesn't mean staying behind. I didn't speak. Say yes, she urged gently. Okay. The award ceremony was held in Washington, D.C. Rowan came. Megan flew in from New York. Gracie wore a bow tie. When they called my name, the room rose. I walked to the podium in a navy blue dress that had once belonged to my mother, her necklace at my throat. Not because I forgave her, but because even broken legacies deserve to be carried forward, with purpose. I cleared my throat. A year ago, I stood in a hospital room and realized I was completely, utterly alone. Silence. But I didn't stay there, and neither did the women who followed me, because healing is not a solo act. It's a chorus, a garden, a rebellion. Applause. I looked down at Megan, at Rowan, at a sea of faces who saw me fully. And so, from that one room, we built another, and another, until the house got big enough for everyone who had ever been left behind. I stepped back. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, a woman approached me, mid-60s, oxygen tube, sharp eyes. My daughter died alone in a hospital 3 years ago, she said. Your story gave me peace I never thought I'd find. We hugged. Back home, I lit a candle for her daughter. And another for myself. Because sometimes we need to remember, we survived. We endured. And we became. Even when they left. Especially then. The day the foundation broke ground on the 3rd Retreat Center, I stood on the edge of the construction site, with my boots in fresh mud, and my hand wrapped around a steel thermos of coffee. It was a clear morning, cloudless and full of quiet, like the sky itself was holding its breath. The site was in Oregon, forested hills, tall pines, and a slow stream that wrapped around the property like a lazy ribbon. We'd bought the land from a widow who said she always dreamed of turning it into a place for healing, but hadn't known how. Now I don't have to, she told me over tea the week before. You're doing it. We called it the 3rd room. Not just because it was the 3rd house, but because, as Rowan put it, sometimes it takes that long to find yourself again. Megan came out to visit in July, just after finishing her first year at Columbia. She was different, not in a flashy way. In the quiet confidence of someone who had walked through fire, and now knew exactly which burns she could survive. You were right, she told me, leaning on the porch railing of the main cabin as we watched the foundation team dig trenches. Law school doesn't teach empathy, but it sure makes you learn how to weaponize compassion. What's that mean? She smiled. It means I'm going to use the system that nearly ruined you to protect women like you. Like us. Rowan joined us that night, driving down from Vermont in his rusty blue pickup with a thermos of cider and a new scar on his hand from fixing a drain pipe. You building this thing too fast, he teased. You know some of us are old. You're not old, Megan shot back. You're vintage. We laughed. Real laughter. No shadows under it. No weight. I hadn't known that kind of joy was still available to me. But it was. In August, I returned to Arlington for the first time in 2 years. The house had been rented out to a family of 4. I walked the street slowly, pausing in front of my old mailbox, now painted a cheery red. Gracie sniffed the grass as if it remembered her. I didn't go up to the door. I didn't need to. That place had been a fortress once, a bunker. But now it was just brick and paint and memory, and I didn't live in memory anymore. Back in Abingdon, I found a box in the attic. Inside, my old hospital wristband, the shredded copy of my original will, photos of the first group of residents, and the letter from my mother. I didn't burn it. I placed it in the cottage archive, a small room we'd converted to house our founding documents. It belonged there, not because it was sacred, but because it was the beginning. The next month, times after they left, was selected by a national book club. Sales exploded. Publishers called again. This time, I said yes, not to change it, but to put it in more hands. Bookstores asked for signings. I agreed to 3. Only 3. One of them was in D.C. When I arrived, Megan was waiting. "There's someone else here," she said quietly. "Daphne." I saw her in the corner, older, thinner. A tremor in her hands she tried to hide behind a silk scarf. She didn't come forward, just watched. When I finished reading, she was gone. Megan sat beside me as I signed books. "She's not ready. Neither am I." And that was enough. In December, we hosted the first nationwide symposium on post-abandonment healing. 200 women attended in person. Thousands watched online. We created a network, guidelines, a grant system, a hotline. We weren't just a house anymore. We were a movement. I gave the closing keynote. This didn't start as a mission. It started as a scar, a wound left by people who were supposed to stay. I paused. Let that sink in. But healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering in a way that sets you free. It means finding purpose where there was once only pain. Rowan hugged me backstage. Megan handed me a copy of the symposium program with a note inside. Greater than, "I love you, not just because you saved me, but because you let me try again." I whispered the words out loud as I sat alone that night, staring at the stars. I love you too. I was no longer alone. A year to the day after that hospital room, I hosted a private ceremony at the Abingdon Cottage. 15 women. Each had survived abandonment. Each had since built something beautiful. We planted trees, one for each story. When we finished, I placed my hand on the last sapling and whispered, "You are not what they left. You are what grew in the silence." And then I walked inside. Not triumphant, just whole. My name is Annalise Whitlow. A year ago, my family abandoned me during surgery. So I changed my will. But more importantly, I changed my life. And I left them nothing. Because they had already given me nothing. And what I built without them is worth everything. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.